the science, the spirituality, and entrepreneurship. It is in the intersection of those three areas where I've stumbled upon and found some really, really interesting knowledge that I do want to share with you. Knowledge that has helped me reset myself and recreate who I am, and knowledge that you can use as well to do the same. So today we're going to talk about the three foundations that make FoFty up. First one is science, which is centered around our physiology in our brain and neurology. The second is spirituality, which involves our experiential component of this reality. And the third is entrepreneurship, which is the framework and methodologies that startup founders use to create something from nothing and to do it successfully. It's really in the combination and the way that those three areas, the science, the spirituality, and the entrepreneurship, merge together and are weaved together to create what is FoFty. I mean, individually, as they stand, these are entire disciplines with, decades and decades of information. Some of them, spirituality, thousands of years of information. And, the point is not to go back and rehash everything that we know, but rather to take what we do understand, the latest versions of what we understand of each of those three areas, and actually merge them together to create something. And actually, from my experience and what I've discovered is that when you do merge them together, some really interesting things come out. Take, for instance, the intersection of entrepreneurship and science. There's a lot that has been learned here, right? So in terms of biohacking, in terms of figuring out how to hustle, there's a lot of techniques and tricks that people have discovered. The example I put into the Substack was when I was out in Silicon Valley, dudes were taking espresso shots right before their 20-minute nap for a power nap because, it takes about 20 minutes for your body to process the caffeine. And so that by the time you wake up from your 20-minute nap, your caffeine is like in full motion. And when you wake up, it's like a double whammy. And, it really works, right? If you've ever tried it, you know what I mean. So this is a well understood thing between entrepreneurship and science. Same thing for entrepreneurship and spirituality. You have to look no further than all the mindfulness, craze that's been, going like a runaway train. Everybody's talking about it. Even when I was working at Bridgewater, under Ray Dalio. So Ray Dalio is a big supporter and proponent of meditation, which I agree with. And every floor of every building had a meditation room, which was kind of crazy, right? I mean, there was like companies I went to. I've even gone to a company, like when I was at GIC, I was involved in actually putting a meditation room together, and even a sleeping room. But I'd never been to a company where already in place there was that many meditation rooms in every facility. And the crazy thing was, it was all booked out. Like, if you wanted to use a meditation room at Bridgewater, like, you had to go into the scheduling system, and it was like, you had to book out weeks in advance because it was all taken. And so, the idea of entrepreneurship and spirituality, rather, is a well understood thing and a phenomenon, and many people practice it. What I find fascinating is the intersection of science and spirituality. This is an interesting area because if you look back at our history of civilization, those two have been at diametrically opposed ends. Like, they don't get along with each other, right? Like, everything that spirituality says, science tries to debunk, and everything that science says, spirituality tries to say, well, you're not looking at the right leveling of interpretation. And, everything from Copernicus, Galileo, and how they got lynched, to what's going on even just up to 50 years ago. But more recently, in the past few decades, what we're seeing is that there is a convergence between spirituality and science, which is amazing, right? So what we're finding out with the newest science that we're uncovering through human physiology, biology, and so forth, is that a lot of the old mantras and practices that, thousands of years ago, the yogis used to do, the Buddhists used to, and even the religions through prayer, actually makes a difference, right? So because now we have instruments such as Teslas that do fMRI imaging of your brain and scans it with a high degree of accuracy. They've studied the monks meditating in Tibet and have learned that they've controlled their minds and brains differently. And as a result, their interpretation and manifestation of the reality that they're in is probably not the same as everybody else. We also know through biology and genetics, or more particularly epigenetics, that the way that your genes and your DNA, which are encoded into your cells and your body, the way they are expressed is highly susceptible to the environment, and more specifically our mind. And so our mind actually plays a significant role in how we express our hard-coded DNA. And so depending on the way you think, the way you express your DNA can change. And we've studied this, that's why there's holistic care for oncology and cancer patients. They know that, your mood and attitude matters. And that's why, they try to incorporate that as part of your recovery program. You can also go the other way, is if you have a negative mindset, you can release through your endocrine system chemicals into your hormones into your body that actually impact the way that your DNA is expressed and alter in a negative way your actual health in this reality. So I find that fascinating how after so many years they're starting to converge, and this part I think is one of the key areas of FoFty that I do want to spend some time discussing. In the coming episodes, one of the first things we're going to try and tackle is our understanding of actually what reality even is. Because that's something that is the core base element that we all, spring from, which is our consciousness ultimately. And if we're not even clear on what that really is, and we have different versions and understandings of consciousness, then we'll be at a bad starting point, right? We won't be coalesced into a common area. That doesn't mean that I'm the one to tell you what consciousness actually is or define it, because nobody has, and not the smartest scientists in the world, nor the philosophers, nor religious. Well, religion has faith, so, they have their version if you believe them, but nobody's really solved it outside of that, right? Outside of pure blind faith. And that's not what I'm trying to do. What I am trying to do is take our best understanding in those three areas and boil it down to our best interpretation, as far as we can go, of what reality that we manifest through our bodies and mind actually is, and what consciousness might be. So people have been asking me, what the heck does FoFty stand for? And I keep telling them, well, what does Apple stand for? But there actually is a meaning behind the name, and I'm going to actually talk about it over here. So FoFty is actually a combination of a couple of words. Primarily, FoFty is founders for lofty. And let me explain what that means. So founders is a key word because that talks about startup founders. Essentially, we all are founders. We just have to expand our mind on what a startup is. So you might say well, I never created a startup. I'm not a founder. What are you talking about? Actually, if you take away the blinders and start understanding that a startup is not just a company, but it could be anything in this reality, then if you think that through and you go through the steps, you're going to arrive where I arrived at, which is then the most important startup is yourself. There is no startup that's more important than yourself. And so if you think about it that way, we're all actually founders, because obviously who's a founder of yourself? It's you, right? You just didn't know about it. And so that's why the word founders is so critical. It's actually symbolically announcing that you yourself are a startup and it's not a company, and that this is the most important startup of your entire life. Now, lofty, that symbolizes an ascension. So lofty, the meaning of it is having height, right? And that means that you have ascended to a certain higher place. And if you take yourself, who you are, and improve on yourself and rise, then you will be in a lofty place. And so lofty signifies your journey and growth into a higher place of being. And so put together, you have founders of lofty. You get FoFty. Now, the backstory is, and I'll share just a couple of minutes on the backstory, is actually it started not that way. The founder bit was right, but what happened was I had actually put a post up on LinkedIn about how there's this myth that startup founders, the successful ones, are all like 20-year-old college dropouts, and that, if you're old, you're not, chances of success are low. And I put this post showing some data saying that actually the most successful founders of startups for unicorns and high growth is actually people in their 40s and 50s. And that post went viral, it got many tens of hundreds of thousands of views and thousands of likes. And I got personally hundreds and hundreds of DMs asking me, if they could join this program that I'm supposedly concocting for founders who are in their middle age or above. And so that struck me. I was like, wow, damn, there's this huge unmet demand of need of people who are trying to figure out what they're doing in their career. They're not sure, and they hear of this program for people in their midlife, and they wanted to join. And I described nothing about what the program, I just said there could be this program. So they were like asking me about this program that didn't even exist. So I took that and I realized that that was something, right, that I couldn't just let go, which contributed part to why I created FoFty. But so the 40 was supposed to be that. It's like founders over 40, so FoFty. Because I thought that was what the idea was, right, for people around 40 or over. But, when I started going through the thinking process and, asking myself, what was this truly all about down at the core and at the root? Because I needed to do that before I would decide to commit myself, right? I arrived with what I just shared with you, that the most important startup is actually yourself and not some company solving some problem or whatever, but actually you. And so that's why it's not founders over 40. It's founders for FoFty. And we just got to think about what that signifies. If we really think through it, right? So take anything that startup founders have to answer or think about their company, their startup. The things such as, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Who is your customer? These are generic questions every startup founder must have a clear answer to. But, if you're the startup and you start asking those questions about yourself, I tell you, which I did, I went through some of this journey already, obviously, which is why I'm doing this. I tell you, these are freaking deep questions. Like, what is the problem you're solving about yourself? Don't tell me you don't have any problems. Everybody does. So what is the problem that you're trying to solve? You got to think through, right? Because you have multiple layers of problems. Then you ask the question of who's your customer. It gets tricky, right? Like, who is your customer? Is it maybe your family, like your children? Like, you want to provide for your children, or is it your wife? Perhaps it's even you, like your inner self. There's something inside of you that needs to be filled, some gap. And so, you could be your own customer. Your inner self could be. So like these things, right? And we'll go through this journey later on, but, just to give an example of what it means to treat yourself as a startup and us being founders for FoFty, that's what the meaning behind FoFty is and why it's called FoFty. So now you know. The last thing I want to just be clear about are things that FoFty is not, so that there's no confusion about what we're trying to do and who we are and what we do. The first thing is that we are not a coaching platform or a bunch of coaches. We're an ideology and a way to understand the ideology and apply it in life, but we are not coaches. And the main reason is, if you actually understand what a coach is, and this term has been poorly used, I believe, is you have skin in the game and you go down with the team if it doesn't work out, and you go up with the team if it doesn't work out. How many coaches, life coaches, career coaches, so on and so forth, do that? If you look at any sporting team with a coach, if the coach, let's say if a basketball team or a football team sucks and they keep losing and never do well, that coach is fired. And not only is he fired, there's no career. You're done. And so that's why you have skin in the game as a real coach, and you really want the success of the team to matter, not just to the person or your client, but to yourself. And so that's what FoFty is also not a religion. Religion requires faith. And the faith that it requires is based on almost no information. You are believing something out of pure faith. And that is not what FoFty is about. FoFty is an ideology that's based on actual science and actual experiences. So the science comes from the science, experiences comes from the spirituality. So you actually experience this thing yourself directly, not somebody told you or you heard from somebody else. It's like your actual internal experience and knowledge. And from that, you form a basis of an ideology or a way of thinking that while it is a belief system, it is not based on pure faith of nothing but stories you heard. And so that's a big difference between what FoFty is and what a religion is. Now, because we are configured that way, and that is by design, we actually are complementary to any religion or any belief system that's like a religion, because we don't go into that, right? So where we leave, any religion can plug into, including atheism, if you will, because that's a belief that there's nothing out there, according to Stephen Hawking, and we're just we should just be lucky and happy and enjoy this. Or if you believe in a god or multiple gods, it doesn't really matter. It all fits into what the FoFty ideology is. And finally, I feel weird saying this, but we're not a cult. A couple of reasons why. One is the idea is to create a decentralized organization. So ultimately, I'm just going to be one of pretty much everybody in a decentralized organizations. And there are ways to try and do this. There's ways that even technology have come about to try and help you do it through DAOs and so on and so forth. And we may explore that later on. We're also, not dogmatic about what we, preach and share. We're totally open to hearing of people's inputs and adapting accordingly, because that's the startup way, right? You don't come out pretending you know everything in the world or in the universe, and you pivot accordingly. And finally, anybody can come and go, or not come, or go. I mean, there's no mandatory period of staying or coming. We're not charging you money to listen to this. You're listening to this not because anybody paid you money. You're listening to this because you might find this somewhat of an interesting idea or concept, and that's why you're here. And you can leave. If it doesn't make sense to you, then that's your choice, right? And so, we're not a cult, but you need to say that up front, because you never know what happens.